Welcome everyone to the Mentoring Lounge from the International Mentoring Community. And today we're going to take a look at a couple of topics along with a bit of open mic as well. It's how to support a mentee and the practice of mentoring. And Doug and I are back here with you on this, what is it, 16th of February. So that's great. And we look forward to sharing some thoughts with you. For those of you who may not know us, I'm Dr. Stephen Hobbs. I am the Director of Certification for the International Mentoring Community, who is hosting the Mentoring Lounge. Doug, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Doug Lawrence, and I'm the Director of Education and Outreach for the International Mentoring Community.
And our agenda usually flows pretty fluidly. If I was to say it that way, it's not like we've come in with a complete and utter set agenda. It's meant to be a lounge. We're meant to encourage people to get involved. I believe if everything is working correctly, I've opened up the chat so that people can interact with us. And please do ask questions, and we'll certainly get to them. We may not jump on them as soon as you post them, but we'll get on to them. Again, when you find this video, please remember to subscribe and ring the bell. Appreciate that. So, Doug, what I'm thinking about doing here is I just want to bring to everyone's attention that March the 2nd at 10 a.m. MST, Mountain Standard Time, Doug and I are going to open up a 2-hour free Zoom call about coaching and mentoring, and to take a look at it through the lens of defining both those terms, and then looking at how they connect, how do they compete, and how do they collaborate. And I just thought I'd share with you, Doug, is that over the past couple of days, I grabbed a notebook and I started over on YouTube. And I opened up and I said, okay, I'm going to look at the first 21 videos that comes up with the phrasing, what is coaching? And then what I did was I started writing down the key points as I was hearing them on one side of the page. And on the other side of the page, I left it blank because I'm going to go through and make a comparison between what is mentoring. All right. So maybe not so much use the word compare, but to make a link between if the statement is made under coaching, does it apply to mentoring? And I'm doing it purposely so that I can sort of get a bit of a pattern in what's going on. It's certainly not scientific research. I think every one of us would agree, but it's a way of just taking a look at it, because randomly, I don't know what's going to pop up. I did the 21 coaching. Now what I'm going to do is 21 of the same what is mentoring. And I'm going to bring that information into that March 2nd gathering. It's a 2-hour free call about what is coaching and mentoring, and what's their connection, what's their competition, and what's their collaboration. And we certainly encourage you to join us. The registration is up at internationalmentoringcommunity.com. That's the homepage. It's a Zoom registration. Just click in, name and email, and you'll get all the details for joining us on that call. And it'll be in the show more notes that go with this video as well. So, Doug, I'm thinking that what might be great here is to take a look at a question that came in about how to support a mentee. And I've sort of popped a few ideas together, and some of these ideas will be listed in the show more notes. So if you want to take notes, you can, folks. If not, you can just sort of go to the show more notes and grab them from there. I just thought I'd ask you, what would be top of mind for you about how to support a mentee, Doug? You've got a deep practice. What comes to mind?
The building of the trusted relationship, and it's extremely important that it's premised on trust. So the trusted relationship would definitely be right at the top for me.
Yeah, and trust is also around like integrity and things like that. It's sort of it opens up a bigger view of what that entails. I think is the case, right?
Right.
So let me give one is how to support the mentee. We use a term like well-being, well-living within the IMC. And for those of you, IMC is International Mentoring Community. I get to the short forms very quickly. Uh, and it's really about discussing with the mentee about this notion of well-being and self-care. And are you taking care of yourself? Because what we were going to do is we just wanted to, pay attention to that as a mentor, is because sometimes the head can be down, there can be a frown on the face, shoulders slump, and you just want to take a look at that and sort of get a sense of it and not assume anything, but actually ask the mentee. And that's one of the key elements of being a mentor and finding a way to support the mentee. We'll go sort of tit for tat here. You got another one, Doug?
Well, it kind of rides on the coattails of what you were just talking about, and that was the aspect of making sure that you observe that you're present and observe I'll call it the behavior of your mentee, excuse me, more than anything else, especially in light of the whole mental health story that's out there, and how we as mentors, excuse me, if we're going to walk into that space, then we definitely need to make sure that we're plugged into, from a presence perspective, that we're plugged into what's going on with our mentee.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I think that sort of aligns itself. I'll offer another one is to be clear yourself as a mentor about your own self-care. Right? And when you walk in, if you are not present in what's going on, it may actually influence the mentee and come from a non-supportive way. So it goes both ways. And I think that goes back to that earlier use of the word trust, because in our definition IMC, we talk about a two-way trusted relationship. And therefore, the mentor has to walk in, sit down, participate from a place where their own well-being is in consideration. And sometimes it might actually lead, the best way to support a mentee if you're not doing well is not show up. In other words, formally cancel the meeting, and don't try to force fit who you are into that time. And I think that's another piece. Anything else you want to add? You got another one?
I actually was thinking the one that also stands out for me is bias. And the idea behind that is I come to a mentoring session with preconceived notions of what the situation is that we're going to be dealing with and what the potential outcomes are going to be. And it should be completely the opposite. It should be coming in with an open mind and asking the right questions in order to get the information that you need to help formulate whereabouts you're going to take the conversation.
And to piggyback on that one is also to help the mentee learn how to ask great questions of you, the mentor. It sort of, again, goes to trusted, two-way kind of combination. Another one that I would add is, depending on what the working relationship of this arrangement connection is, there might be, how does the organization, the workplace, the charitable workplace support it, and or if it's coming into play, maybe there's the family and friends and community. What kind of support is also there for the mentee, and paying attention to that? I think here a really good example is youth mentoring, and being able to understand what is the support system for the mentee. In other words, that youth that may be sitting across from you, what's that like, and thinking it through, and by extension, coming into the workplace, coming into the community, from home, whatever it might be, what's that environment in terms of supporting you. I think another one that I'll add is another way to support the mentee, and this is a plug, is that if you're new to mentoring, get certified. If you are into mentoring and you don't think that certification is what you need, then make sure that you create your own code of presence, code of behavior, code of interaction that goes with it. With mentoring, just simply because of the certification, there's a code that sort of goes with that. And that's another way to support, because you don't want to be moving or entering into this sort of mentoring, and it has the appearance of being like Swiss cheese and you can drive a truck through it, right? That is not the kind of mentoring you want to do. You want to be well grounded in what's happening, fluid in your approach, at the same time as understanding. And that's why I wanted to mention this. And again, the international mentoring community does offer a certification program. There are 3 certificates that you can work with, and one is recognition, that gets you grounded, baseline. Another one is achievement, where you get to learn all of the concepts. And then there's competence, where you actually move into practice, take the concepts, move into practice, and you can get recognized with a certificate of competence, a mentor. Anything else that we want to add to this topic of how to support a mentee, Doug?
I have nothing else to add.
Okay. Why don't we move into, you're constantly answering Quora-related questions. I'm just going to ask you to share what that Quora question is that you encountered, and what would be your response to that question.
So this particular question is one that I get asked a lot, and it's a variation of the one that I get asked a lot. So the question that was posed is buying mentorship worth it in 2022? And my response was, I agree with the statement that you need to make the decision whether you want to invest in yourself or not. A mentor can't answer that for you. You obviously would have some options. A session-by-session option works for you from not having to commit to the long term, but makes it really difficult to develop a trusting relationship, which is a foundational element for successful mentoring relationships and arrangements. Purchasing a package of time is another option that would work for both you and the mentor. The mentor can commit to a strategy over a fixed period of time versus a commitment based on session by session.
Okay.
And what I've found, and I've been doing some more research on this paid versus free, and the idea that takes us back to when mentoring first started back in the old days, even older than
us.
Yeah. I had to go there. So, but what I'm starting to see is there's now, if you go to some of the job sites, that they're actually listing, or they've posted positions for mentors to work within organizations, and they actually have statistics on, how much, what a potential fee structure could look like, and all of that stuff. And so it's starting to shift, and hence this particular question where we talk about buying mentorship, or which is basically, engaging with a mentor to come into your organization or to work with you outside of the organization. It's bringing that more and more to the forefront.
Yeah, and I think that we have to really pay attention to what that question is about, right? And as a mentor, is pay attention to what it means to you as you're going to unfold your practice, which happens to be something we're going to talk about here next, is the practice of mentoring. And So yeah, I think you're on to something here, and I'm going to ask that you just give us that question in your notes, and we'll put it into the show more notes, and so that people, if they want to, they can read through that and your response to it, so that it's there as well. So that's great. Okay. Is there anything? I'm just free for all here. Anything wild and wonderful happening around mentoring that you've seen, feel? Mention your book again. What anything going on around mentoring that you want to share with us?
Well, okay, I'll put the plug in for the book, and we'll do that. The book that I've written is You Are Not Alone, and it's a book that focuses on mentoring as part of the support structure for mental health. And so the book is available on Amazon.ca and .com, and it was also it's an Amazon #1 bestseller, so it made the bestseller list. So we're quite excited about that, and that's one of the things that I'm starting to see, and I know from a practice perspective, is I'm starting to get asked more and more often about if we have this initiative going on, how can we weave or insert mentoring into that, because we actually believe that it can bring value. So as an example, I'm working with an organization that is very much focused on mental health, mental well-being, and what they've asked is, can we take what you do and weave that into one of our service offerings that we're going to have in place from a community perspective. So that's, definitely one of the things I'm seeing, is that the aspect of mentoring and mental health is starting to gain momentum, and people are starting to see that. I'm also seeing from a practice perspective that people are starting to look more seriously at mentoring and starting to recognize the value that it can bring to people, but also to organizations as well. So I'm seeing that as a trend that's starting to, to move forward, actually quite quickly as well, because I've had a number of inquiries from organizations and from people looking to saying, how difficult would it be for you to come help us implement workplace mentoring or anything like, stuff along that lines? How difficult would that be for you to come and help us do that? Because we see the value in the case of an organization, our employees are actually asking for it, which is great to hear. So yeah, those are some of the things.
That's great. Yeah, I'm starting down the path of researching a new book that's connecting this notion of life and career transition into your next 50, and how might elder and mentor fit into that storyline for who's ever in that transition. And so I'm doing the research, reaching out to people to see some of their ideas and get the phrasing from them that would be then helpful for the book and a course. And so hopefully that will be available. Certainly the first crack at it, the prototypes and the versions, version 1 of the book in the next 6 weeks or so. I'm taking the fast track view to that and seeing what unfolds and getting it out there, because I can see a lot of people are finding themselves ill prepared for that transition and unfocused. And I think that there's something that we can do, and supported by the international mentoring community as well, like Doug is doing with the mental health area. So let's see how that all unfolds. So Doug, I got a question for you. And each time I get together with Doug on one of these calls, I just say to him, look, I'm going to ask you a question, but you don't get to know what the question is. So this is that question. Okay, Doug? So
all right.
Here we go. So as you mentor, in terms of your own practice of mentoring, would you say you use more push or pull, or a combination in your mentoring conversations?
It would be a combination of the two, push and pull, and it's driven by the mentee, but it's also driven by the circumstances or situation that we're dealing with. I've learned that, say, for example, if you're working with somebody who is struggling with mental health challenges, that if you push too much, they push back, and it can cause behavioral changes that aren't what you want to see in that sort of a relationship. So I then have to, I have to sort of take the step, and it would be push, pull, and pause, I guess would be the other part. Is there is a place for pausing in the conversation to allow time for us to kind of let our emotions subside somewhat, so that we can be a little bit more clear-headed in having the conversation. So I would say, based on what I've experienced, it's a combination of push, pull, and pause.
Okay. Yeah, I'm asking it because I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and I know we're going to talk about practice of mentoring next. I get that. But what I did was I said, well, look, in mentoring is one of the things that you're doing is you're looking for the fibers to form the threads that get you to the strings, that get you to the cord, that get you to the rope. And it's a lot easier to pull the rope than it is to push the rope. And that metaphor works well, but there are some times, to your point, where, hang on a minute, I may have to push a little bit here, right? And there's other times I have to pull, but at the same time, this not all push, it's not all pull. There's a bit of a combination that goes with that. So I was just curious how you would answer, and I really appreciate putting the pause aspect in there. I sometimes call that the credibility factor, right? Hey, you're actually pausing here. You're not just jumping from listening into sharing or speaking. You're actually pausing and thinking about this, and I think that's really great. And so thank you for your response. Okay, and I think what that does is it gets us to maybe move into taking a look at the practice of mentoring. And do you want to take us into that one and see where we go?
I can after you answer my question.
Oh, you got a question for me?
I have one that I get asked this a lot, and
okay.
Is what's the difference between accreditation and certification?
Okay. The way that I look at it is accreditation is to the organization as certification is to the person. So, like, for example, in IMC, we're working on ISO standards and regulations. So in a sense, when those are assigned to us, they're assigned to us by ISO, and it sort of gives us a sense of we're accredited to those standards and regulations. Now, it's interesting that ISO talks about those are actually certifications, but I just to give that sense, the accreditation. So, for example, if IMC was to say to an organization, we accredit you as an educating deliverer of, or you are accredited as a verifier, auditor of what we do, then that's against the organization. But the certification of like an auditor, verifier would go against the person. So that's why our certifications goes against the person, and to be able to do it from that perspective. Okay, is that what you're looking for? Does that help?
Yep, that clears it up quite nicely. So thank you.
Yeah, and there's an article on our blog, internationalmentoringcommunity.com/blog, and I can't remember, something about certification ISO.
Right.
I can see it. It has a yellow background, but I can't pick up the title. But it has something to do with mentoring, ISO, and certification. So you can certainly go and jump. We'll put a link in the show more notes here as well. Okay. So then let's go into the practice of mentoring. You want to guide us through that one?
I certainly can. And when I talk about I have a practice of mentoring. What it basically means to me is that that's my commitment to the mentoring process, the mentoring structure, and all of that, to make sure that I consistently bring value to a relationship. And it's about being consistent. So applying the processes and the concepts that are there, that to make sure that we apply those on a consistent basis. I also feel that as part of having a practice of mentoring, that there are some expectations on my part for me to live up to, and part of that is the aspect of, so what is required for me to have a practice of mentoring? Well, number one, it's to make sure that I know what those concepts and practices are. Number two, that I'm constantly checking or researching how can we make those better? How can we enhance the deeper, richer mentoring experience that's out there today? How can we enhance that? And how can I enhance what I offer in order to be able to do that? And then, getting into, when you have the idea of the practice, that's where you end up sometimes getting into those conversations about paid versus free and all of those things. And how I approach that from my perspective is, my best answer that I can give you is, I'll never leave someone on the island by themselves. So if it's a case of I have money or I don't have money, I need mentoring, but I can't afford to pay for it, then we'll have a conversation and we'll deal with it. And also with the practice that I have, I do a lot of pro bono work with organizations such as American Corporate Partners in the U.S., helping military personnel transition from military life to civilian life, and obviously dealing with some issues along the way as well. So from my perspective, that kind of at a real high level sort of gives you an idea or a sense of what my practice of mentoring is all about.
For sure. And I'm just going to add a few to that. I'm going to come through a little bit like more of the lens of IMC to the practice of mentoring. Doug was giving a bit more of, I am a practitioner looking at mentoring. And again, chime in if there's something here that you want to add to what I'm sharing, okay? The first thing goes back to the notion of a code of mentoring, the certification of mentoring. It's important from a practice point of view. Certainly, if you're starting up, I would certainly encourage you to get your certification. And it's not mandatory. There's nowhere where it says it's mandatory. It's just to get that foundational elements, that platform for yourself to move forward. And I believe that it's sort of a way in which to instill this notion of credibility. All right. You'll notice I didn't say professionalism, okay, because that's a term we got to be really alert to. From an IMC point of view, we're not saying that you become a professional mentor. That's not where we're going with this. You become credible, you become knowledgeable in the concepts and practices, you become competent in your delivery of those, but you will not hear us actually say professional. So we're not into a professional practice of mentoring. I want to be clear about that. Another one that I would pick up on is that while we talk about the practice, there is a difference between a wise practice and best practice. And a best practice is what someone would be able to see, hear, feel, touch, smell that someone else has done. But when you bring it into your own personal practice, then it becomes a wise practice. Because if you just keep implementing that best practice as is, you may not be doing it correctly or to its full extent because you haven't made it your own. And therefore, even the action outcomes, the profile, the competence statements that are sometimes called, or action outcome statements, these could be considered best practices And it's when you turn them in and they become yours and you're using them, they become wise practices. And therefore, we are saying in IMC with these elements, while they're not cast in stone, they are what you are verified against. And that's an important distinction. And as you get more involved with IMC, you'll learn a bit more about that distinction. There's something else that we did some time back, Doug. And if you remember, just because you can doesn't mean you should. From a practice of mentoring, just because you think you can mentor, and this will go with coaching and training and instructing, any of the educating approaches, sometimes it's best that you don't do it until you know that you have this credibility, this way of looking at your practice and saying, I'm not going to do any harm to someone. I'm actually going to contribute. I'm going to support them in their participation with me. So just because you can doesn't mean you should. So keep that one in mind. And I think that another one is to pay particular attention to this. And I had to learn this the hard way, is that when you're mentoring, mentor in the words of the mentee on your terms. Now, let me break that down a little bit. What I did, my learning is that I was using my words in the mentoring conversations. I wasn't necessarily always using the words of the mentee. And what was happening is I eventually figured out is that if I'm using my words, I'm not really getting to the person. I'm not touching their heart. I might get their head, but I'm not getting their heart. And I learned that if I use their words and we have an exchange, and then I say, okay, can I suggest another way to look at it? Then I might be able to bring my words into it. But I also learned is that I have to stay on my terms. If I'm the mentor, I have to stay in the boundaries of being it on my terms until there's a conscious decision to shift the arrangement and the relationship. And that happens as mentoring moves along. And you have to pay attention to that when that does look like it's going to happen, so that you can figure out this sort of situation, learning the bounding of the arrangement and the relationship. So I just wanted to bring that out. It's a subtle point, and it's an important one. Mm-hmm. And I learned the hard way because I get some of those deer in the headlight looks when I'm sitting across from someone, and a couple of people said, I don't always get what you're talking about. And what's going on here? And right. And then more and more I shifted, and I finally got to a point where I truly understand this notion of in their words on my terms until you consciously decide otherwise. That's what I learned from that. Does anything of what I just brought up bring any points to mind for you at this point?
Just validation of the aspect of with having your own practice. It's really important that you look at the number one as a starting point, training of some sort, to training as a mentor. So to have that in place. The other part is that if you're truly serious about having a mentoring practice and providing value, that I do wholeheartedly recommend the aspect of becoming certified as a mentor. That's really important, and it does enhance your credibility. And just as a real quick example, I was speaking with an organization that was having some issues, and they felt that potentially mentoring could be the solution. And they set up a meeting with me, and I got asked the question, to keep a story short, I got asked the question, why should we hire you? And my response was, obviously, because I can bring value, because I have gone through a certification for mentors. I've gone through a certification process that has asked me, I've had to demonstrate that I'm actually competent as a mentor. That's why you need to hire me. And they did.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks for that. So what we're doing is we're drawing to a close then. The All Things Mentoring Lounge, brought to you by the International Mentoring Community. Again, you can join us. And Doug and I have said, hey, listen, why don't we get together every Wednesday rather than every second Wednesday? And what we're going to do is we're going to put together a Mentoring Lounge show. Some of them might be 20 minutes, some might be 35, some might be even longer. Depends what's going on. But we decided that we would bring this to you at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, which is a Wednesday. And you can actually access it through the YouTube channel for IMC. You can access it through Facebook, the International Mentoring Community. You can join there as well. And obviously, you might be picking it up now, having sort of do some searching, looking for mentoring. You might have picked it up on the YouTube channel. I also we're streaming it over to Wealth Movement as well. So it's there because there is a story of mentoring unfolding as well. So I think, Doug, I will close it down today, and we certainly will welcome you all back, and we certainly encourage you to, subscribe, ring the bell, and add comments. And if you want to, come live with us with your questions. And if we find that we can bring you in and you want to come in, maybe we can bring you live onto the show with us, and we can have some great interactions. So, Doug, again, always a pleasure to interact with you and to share stories about mentoring, mentorship. So to everyone, thanks. And Doug, you get the going out.
Make every moment a mentoring moment. Have a great day.
Yeah,
Take care.
Take care.